제명의 주제 발표자들이 나누는 토론입니다. 네 분이 하셨군요.
こちらマイクの方もございますので、こちらお待ちになってよろしくお願いします。
はい、それではこれからパネルディスカッションということなんですけれども、当初は20分の予定だったんですが、時間が押してございまして、パネルディスカッションの時間が10分しかございません。それでパネルディスカッションと言えるかどうか、疑問でございますが、少なくともお三方に、1問ずつ問いかけをしてお答えをいただきたいと思うんですが、まずですね、アメリカからお越しになったお二人のスピーカーにですね、お二人ともこの米韓関係の将来についてはかなり悲観的といいますか、厳しい展望を語られたように思うんですが、こうした状況の中で米韓関係を改善するためにアメリカや日本が具体的に少しでもどんなことができるだろうかということをアメリカからお越しになった2人のスピーカーの方々にお考えをお示しいただければと思います。そして、インドについても語っていただきましたけれども、この東アジアの安全保障をめぐって日本とインドがどういう安全保障分野での協力ができるのかということについて後でお話を伺えればと思います。まず米韓関係からについてお二人のうちどちらからでも結構ですがいかがでしょうか。
Well, let me start by saying that I do believe that there are some enduring variables that make me less pessimistic, I guess, about the future of U.S.-ROK relations. I think one is that China's rise, as I mentioned in my talk, is something that will have an impact on South Korean security. While it's understandable that South Korea is more narrowly focused on the North Korean challenge, I think the longer-term challenge that will threaten everyone in the neighborhood is China. So I think there is a unifying factor here, in my view, over the longer term. The second, I think, is the fact that something that we don't talk about frequently enough is the role of values, that we do have an opportunity to unify, essentially, many of the U.S.-led alliances in the region, and that is the shared common values that both Japan, South Korea, the United States, and Australia, for example, share in democracy. And having a like-minded coalition, I think, is going to be another critical factor in countering China's rise, and that's going to be another glue, I believe. So it's not just the threat component, but I think the value component will also seek to consolidate, I think, these relationships. So my hope is that we can get through this rough patch that Gordon very well articulated. And my hope is that those other variables will come into play and keep these alliances on track.
I agree with Toshi. China is going to drive or tend to drive countries in the region together to understand that they do have a need for common defense. But when it comes to specifically the U.S.-South Korea alliance, the problem is that Moon Jae-in and especially his advisors don't want the United States on the peninsula. They are deeply anti-American, and that's a long conversation. They shouldn't be, but in fact they are. So if it's up to normal sort of circumstances, they would find one way or another to make sure that the U.S. alliance was broken and that U.S. forces would be off the peninsula. There are a couple of things, though, and I will be a little bit optimistic like Toshi. First of all, Moon Jae-in's approval rating has now dropped for 7 straight weeks. It's got a long way to go, but because of problems in the South Korean economy, directly caused by Moon's policies, that approval rating, I think, will continue to plummet. And that means, as it does so, Moon will have less and less room to create mischief. So I think that essentially that's one thing. Also, the United States tends to be very patient. We outlasted 2 progressive South Korean presidents, Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun. By the way, Moon was Roh Moo-hyun's chief of staff and was driving Roh Moo-hyun in very dangerous directions. But we survived 10 years of presidents who didn't particularly like us. We probably can survive 5 years of Moon Jae-in. So in that sense, things probably will go better. And also, we got to remember the last thing, and that is that most South Koreans do not have the same ideological drive to unify with North Korea. Most South Koreans want what we want, what everybody else in the world wants, which is peace and stability, prosperity. And so I think that you'll find that most South Koreans will oppose Moon and his advisors. But this is going to be a very close-run thing. Having the U.S. thrown out of South Korea is going to be extremely dangerous, not only for the United States, in the sense we have maybe less of a concern than others, but certainly it's going to be of vital importance for Japan for the reason that I mentioned, and for peace and stability in the region as a whole. So this is going to be something where all of us have a direct interest in making sure that Moon Jae-in does not destabilize South Korea.
Well,
인도에서
let me say that my views will be closer to the neighborhood. I don't share the same optimism over the next few years, over the next short term, as to what China's ambitions are. I think the policies that Xi Jinping spelled out at the last party congress in October last year were very clear. Apart from the China Dream, which he gave a deadline of 2021, he spoke about Made in China 2025, which I referred to earlier, and he said that by 2050, he hopes that China will have pioneering global influence. In other words, to create or influence international organizations that already exist. In other words, what he has said is he will take on the United States in terms of influence. As far as Japan and India are concerned, we are in this neighborhood, we are in this region, and we are going to be directly impacted. The South China Sea, I think, is integral to the raw material supplies that both of our countries get. And we need to see that that remains navigable, and it remains neutral, and it remains open. That is one of the points of convergence that India and Japan have. But there are a few other things that we need to look at, and that is the manner in which China is flexing its muscles and trying to spread its economic might and economic influence. So let me touch on three quick things. One is the, shall I say, the inability of ASEAN to take a position on the South China Sea. Because they operate on consensus, and China has at least 3 countries in the ASEAN which are not going to do anything without Beijing's clearance. So I think that's that. They're talking now about a code of conduct to be pushed through in 3 years. Let's see what happens. But as far as India and Japan are concerned, of course, at the top of my mind would be more, shall I say, a defense cooperation that we need to look at, areas where we can work together. We already have maritime cooperation, we have naval exercises, but we need to move further and try and look at joint defense manufacturing. That's one that I would look at. The second is to build up ASW capability, anti-submarine warfare capability, which I think, given the fact that an increasing number of Chinese submarines are appearing in the Indian Ocean, in this region, is something that is a matter of concern. I would flag it as a matter of joint concern. The third is in the economic arena, where I think Japan and India need to work together. They both have strengths, economic strengths, and goodwill lying in various countries. And if we marry our forces, I think we will be able to make a very effective inroad into Africa and maybe even into some parts of ASEAN. So these are the 3 that I would look at straight away. ありがとうございました。実はもうこれで時間がなくなってしまったんですけども、先ほどの吉原さんのお話の中で、アメリカの東アジアの同盟諸国との間での価値の共有という話がありましたよね。で、ペンス副大統領もこの間のシンガポールの演説で、アメリカファーストってアメリカだけじゃないんだということをおっしゃる。大変心強いんですが、しかし他方で、やはりトランプ大統領自身からね、これまでアメリカが掲げてきたようなバリューについてのボキャブラリーがほとんど欠けている。大統領は人権について語らないし、大統領は民主主義について語らない。 このトランプ政権の下で本当に我々はバリューシェアリングできるんだろうか、最後の問いについていかがでしょうか。
As it was mentioned, I think, by another speaker, I think Vice President Mike Pence's speech at the Hudson Institute in October is probably the best indicator of where the administration is coming from when it comes to this issue of values. I recommend all of you in reading the speech, and on many occasions in the speech, when talking about America's shift on China policy, he specifically referred to the Chinese Communist Party or the Communist Party or the party. This is clearly telegraphing a very strong direct signal that there is in fact a strong ideological component to the emerging U.S. strategy towards China. That the United States in fact has a problem with the party, that it is no longer business as usual with China, which is to treat China as a transactional business partner. That increasingly the problem at its root, China's aggressiveness, China's ambitions, China's military buildup is designed specifically to, put it in a term used by a Princeton professor, the goal is to make the world safe for authoritarianism. I think that is at the root of Chinese external behavior. And I think the Trump administration recognizes that authoritarian root of its behavior and of its strategy, and therefore the United States will take all sorts of measures to target the party. And I think it's notable, for example, that this idea that the party represents an ideological threat also enjoys bipartisan support on Capitol Hill. So I think values do matter. We have to value our values. Ultimately, that is the thing that is worth fighting for.
ありがとうございました。予定の時間をすでに超過をしております。はい。
Can I have one question? Can I have one
大丈夫
question?
ですか？
No, the time.
大丈夫。Please.
Toshi and Gordon, there is any American government ever thinking about the talking to South Korean government, Moon Jae-in, whether they can release President Park Geun-hye. If you remember, back at 30 years ago, Kim Dae-jung, when he got sentenced by the Chun Doo-hwan government, he got death sentence. At that time, and the U.S. government influenced through the Korean Chun Doo-hwan government to the political asylum to Kim Dae-jung went to the U.S. Now, why is nobody ever talking about this issue? Especially Park Geun-hye got completely innocent. I think that the U.S. government should get involved talking to the South Korean government to try to get rid of, not get released to the President Park Geun-hye, especially since in the bad health. This is a very human right issue as well. Thank you.
Right.
どちらかでもお答え、手短にお答えいただけますか。
네, 유진
I
뉴스님.
think the important thing is that one way or another, President Park will be free. I don't know exactly how it will occur, but it's not only the just thing, but it seems to be what the people of South Korea want as well. So I think that we will see her free. It may not be as soon as we want, but it will occur.
ありがとうございました。それでは予定の時間を過ぎておりますので、パネルディスカッションを閉じさせていただきます。ご協力ありがとうございました。
왜 미국 정부가 박 대통령의 석방에 개입하지 않느냐. 그 건강도 나쁜데 이렇게 질의했습니다. 그래서 고든창이 이건 심각한 인권 문제지 않느냐라는 질문하시고 고든창이 머지않은 장래에 석방되는 걸 볼 수 있을 거다. 정근해지는 대답이었습니다. 예, 여기까지였습니다. 세션을 마쳤습니다. 안보에 관한 세션을 마쳤습니다. 예, 한반도에 닥치는 그 위기가 커지고 있다는 주제로 4명의 그 스피커와 그리고 토론이 있었습니다. 일주일까지 하겠습니다.